I'm here today to ask the medical professional about the Black Death, aka the bubonic plague, which killed off a third of Europe's population in the 16th century.
The Black Death killed nearly 200 million people during its first recorded epidemic in the 16th century.
Hello. What can I help with you today?
I would like to learn about the symptoms and the cures used for the bubonic plague during its epidemic in Europe.
Okay. Let me see. The Black Death outbreaks were transmitted by fleas that most commonly lived on rats, which is why these rodents are so popular to blame for the epidemic. But the disease could also be transmitted from an infected person's breath.
The River Thames was also the perfect vehicle for ensuring the spread of the disease, as it was a tidal river, and as such acted like a natural sewer. Everyone used the river, and everyone would have come in contact with the everyday presence of the dirt and rats. The disease also followed caravan routes and spread with the aid of European shipping and the accompanying rats.
Symptoms included painful swelling or bubbles of the lymph. Symptoms included painful swelling or bubbles of the lymph nodes in the armpits, legs, neck, or groin. Victims also suffered high fever, delirium, vomiting, muscular pain, bleeding in the lungs, and mental disorientation. There was also an intense desire to sleep, which would quickly lead to death if one were to fall asleep.
Wow, that sounds so terrible. And with medical technology being so inept, how was there any hope of them doing anything for the victims?
Well, the best cure often was the cruelty of quarantine or sending them to the Elizabeth Press house so that they would not further spread the disease. Most victims would often die within 2 or 4 days.
In the late 16th and 17th centuries, victims of the Black Death would often be sealed in their own homes, locked and bolted from the outside. They were not allowed to leave, and no one else was allowed to enter.
That's horrible. Didn't they do anything to help?
Watchmen would stay at plague houses, and the victims would lower a basket from an upper window for the watchmen to put food in. And although watchmen were very well paid, it soon became a great risk, as most watchmen ended up catching the disease and dying themselves. Soon, women and boys, especially those who had already survived the bubonic plague, would be forced to undertake this job. Their encouragement was the threat of imprisonment. One medieval physician had the idea that corpses not be immediately taken to plague pits, but left rotting in their homes until the disease could be better contained. And to add to this gruesome picture, due to food shortages, many people would resort to stealing food from the dead bodies. Punishment for this crime was to be thrown into the plague pits with the dead bodies, whether you were dead or alive.
Well, a plague pit is where they put all the dead victims. They were generally 20 feet deep and would continue to be expanded to accommodate for all the victims. Plague pits were also often reopened.
Didn't they have any better attempts at curing the Black Death?
Well, only the very wealthy could use physicians who would have received an education at one of the universities, and there were Elizabethan surgeons. But most people visited the apothecary, and the wise women were really the only hope for any medical treatment.
Well, what kind of medical treatment?
Blood clotting or cutting open a vein nearest the affected part of the body was commonly thought to be one of the best treatments. But various concoctions of herbs were used for different parts of the body and for different symptoms. Headaches were treated with herbs such as rose, laxander, sage, aloe. Stomach pains were treated with wormwood, mint, and balm. Lung problems were treated with licorice, and comfrey and vinegar was widely used as a cleansing agent, as it was believed it would kill disease.
Overall, the bubonic plague's effects were severe. In 1328, China's population dropped from 125 million to 90 million because of it. And in autumn of 1347 in Alexandria, nearly 1,000 people were dying every day. 2 months later in Cairo, over 7,500 people were dying every day. For the next 60 years, the virus devastated all of Europe.
Thanks for all the info. Goodbye.
Never be the same. Girl, you came and changed the way I walk, the way I talk.